Good morning. Welcome to Supply Chain Insights webinar, Taking Charge of Your Career. I'm your host, Allison Crawford. Your career will go through many ups and downs, including mergers, spin-offs, global expansion opportunities, new project assignments, downsizing, and right-shoring. The only constant will be change. Today, we're talking with Laura Cessary of Supply Chain Insights, Andrew Breyer of Procter & Gamble, and Fran O'Sullivan of IBM on how they've managed their careers and counseled up-and-comers on how to succeed through change, surprises, and challenges. In just a minute, I'll hand this over to Laura, but first, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we're recording today's session and we'll be posting it to our on-demand webinar page. Please visit our website to listen to this or any of our other webinars. Second, we'll send out the slides to all attendees within 24 hours of the conclusion of this webinar. Please share these slides with others in your organization, and if you have questions, reach out to Laura or myself to set up a private discussion. Third, we encourage everyone to ask questions throughout the webinar. Please post the Q&A or chat function to the left of your screen. We've left time at the end of the webinar to address your questions. Fourth, if you'd like to live tweet during the event, use the hashtag SCIWebinar. With that, let me introduce your speakers. Laura Cessary, founder of Supply Chain Insights, has 35 years of diverse supply chain experience. This includes 12 years as an industry analyst, 15 years building supply chain software, and 12 years managing operations teams within manufacturing. She'll be moderating the discussion as well as talking about her perspectives both as a supply chain practitioner as well as a researcher watching the evolution of our industry. We're joined by Andrew Breyer, a 30-year veteran of P&G managing logistics and supply chain network operations. Andrew has led teams and mentored supply chain professionals in North America and around the globe. He'll discuss his outlook on career growth in supply chain and share advice on how to succeed in your career. We're also joined by Fran O'Sullivan, General Manager of Systems Strategy and Operations at IBM. Throughout her career, Fran has managed global teams that are diverse, multi-talented, and goal-oriented. She'll share insights into why her teams are so successful and the traits she's found to be most beneficial to cultivating a career in supply chain. So Laura, I know that everyone on the phone is eager to hear from three such distinguished guests, so with that, let me hand the floor over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Allison. When I was planning this webinar, which our design of webinars are to set the stage with the research that we're doing to promote a discussion of industry leaders, I thought hard about who I wanted to have on the webinar. And I came from Procter & Gamble, and I experienced the Procter & Gamble culture, and Procter & Gamble has definitely developed a culture and a reputation for building strong culture. So I reached out to Andrew, and I'm so excited to have him join us today. Secondly, I've been doing a lot of work with Fran O'Sullivan over the last 3 years, and Fran's been really gracious to do a number of podcasts around analytics and building T-shaped managers and building great teams, and I thought Andrew and Fran just have great insights. So I appreciate both of you joining us today and giving your advice to the next generation and current supply chain leaders. Let's start with some baseline research. Supply chain organizations look really different around the world. If we look at supply chains around source, make, and deliver, today 58% of companies have procurement reporting through supply chain organizations. 54% have manufacturing reporting through organizations. Roughly 1/3 of companies have source, make, deliver reporting through the same leader. And 70% of companies today have supply chain organizations, so we see them growing into mid-market companies, and they're about 15 years on average. And we have the elevation of a supply chain leader with a chief supply chain officer, and about 1/3 of companies have a supply chain center of excellence, but only 1 in 2 companies say it's effective. So Andrew and Fran, let's just check in here. How would you compare your supply chain to these kind of characteristics? Andrew?
Very consistent. Our chief supply chain officer directly reports to our CEO. We have had centers of excellence. We're trying to continually refine and improve them. And we've had a formal supply chain organization maybe a little longer than 15 years, but generally, Laura, very consistent with the statistics you're finding.
So, Andrew, when I interviewed Keith Harrison for my book, Bricks Matter, he talked about in 1982 that Procter & Gamble put source, make, and deliver under one organization. And I know from time to time procurement may come and go, but manufacturing has always been at the core of your organization. Any comments there around what you think that means to the supply chain at P&G?
I think in the 90s and 2000s, and we're halfway through the next decade, we've probably gotten clearer that supply chain is broader than manufacturing, and being great at manufacturing is insufficient at being great at supply chain. Just the needs to link with customers, designing platforms with engineering and partnering with R&D. So I think we've just continued to evolve, is frankly what I'd say.
Yeah. Fran, how about you? How do you define supply chain at IBM? And, I know you're responsible for more of the manufacturing side of IBM. Can you talk through your characteristics?
Yeah, I think the focus, we went through a period where we globally integrated. We had each division had its own manufacturing plant, its own manufacturing systems. Each country had its own way to procure. And so we did a lot of global integration, and that took a while. But I think the spirit of that now is you get such advantage on end-to-end focus, no matter where the teams report. And when you stop the handoff, and now we're getting all the systems together such that we can pull the data out and get insights from it, is where we're really starting to get true business insights, but also we're affecting the bottom line. We're returning back to the business. So this, end-to-end, not just focus, but total integration and sharing the data and setting business rules around that is really kind of where we're heading. And that doesn't have to just be in normal supply chain, right? As Andrew said, tying it very close with our development teams, with our sales support teams, with accounts receivable, for example. All of that is really it's been a revolution for us as we're going forward.
Well, Fran, any insights about how you build end-to-end and how you get out of functional silos to be able to think more cross-functionally?
Yeah, we actually spent a lot of time on that. I mean, that was one of our key strategic initiatives. We kind of over-communicate it, reward for it. But maybe one thing, if I kind of do the twist of the theme of this webinar, is we went back. Let's just go to the last one in 2010. Thinking of this end-to-end, we said these are the skills a successful supply chain professional is going to need in 2015, and we just refreshed it for now 2020. And there were some new skills, and they were all around client focus. They were around understanding business analytics for decision makers. Didn't have to understand the deep math, but had to understand how to apply business analytics to their job. And this end-to-end supply chain or T-shaped skill. No longer could you be successful, when our systems are end-to-end, an individual that doesn't understand end-to-end isn't going to be successful. And then gave everyone every means to go develop their development plans and have either training or, things like attend grapevine seminars, lunch and learn, do shadowing, so to develop those skills, and just kept reinforcing it. I don't think it happens overnight. You have to say this is what's important, this is what you reward on, and make sure you're making all your decisions around it to keep reinforcing it.
Now, Fran, I've heard you talk a lot about T-shaped managers, but I don't know that people on the phone know what that means. Can you explain what that concept is and how you've integrated it into some of your human resource practices?
Yeah, what we called T-shaped is that if you think of it just like the letter, you need your vertical deep skills. But unlike the old days where you could work in vertical silos, right? You graduate from college and you're going to say, my discipline is procurement, and I stay in that vertical my whole career. I don't think you can be successful doing that anymore. You have to understand how does the sales team working and getting procurement involved early. You have to understand the fulfillment. You have to understand the delivery to the client, whatever it is. So then we have the horizontal of the T across it, and we specified specific skills. So, fulfillment or understanding development or client facing. And then we have what we call T-shaped worksheets where you can then say, okay, well, that's how I got that experience, and you can start checking it off. And then as you get to higher levels within the supply chain, we made it a criteria, so you couldn't get promoted unless you had demonstrated T-shaped skills.
And how long have you been doing that? Is that recent, or what's the evolution?
We're probably, I would say we finally got to where we are in 2011, so we're in our 4th year.
So, Andrew, let's turn it to Procter & Gamble. How about yourself as you look at movement from functional silos to more of an end-to-end strategy? How would you characterize where you're at and, kind of the building of that talent?
So I think very similar to what Fran was describing at IBM, although I love the T-shape because it's a very visual symbol. We look at our product supply organization, which has, many legs: engineering, manufacturing, purchases, quality, logistics. And we've recognized that the best supply chains are going to have the best supply chain leaders and supply chain talent. And that is defined not as a specific area like manufacturing or logistics, but people who broadly understand the supply chain. Suppliers through to customers and frankly to the shelf, and with e-business, to consumer delivery. And we are working very hard to build supply chain leaders who have that broader set of skills. And we, similar to the long part of the T, we are thinking of that like as your home base, your area of profound mastery. With broadening, and it's expected you get broadening in other areas of the supply chain. And we also look for broadening in other parts of the geography. Again, thinking the best supply chain leaders, they frankly have more understanding of the supply chain from different aspects of view.
And is that built into career pathing and promotion like Fran's talking about? And how long have you been at that?
Yes, it is part of criteria to advance, particularly to higher levels of leadership. And, so it's pretty formal. It's not, I do want to clarify, it's not box tick. You're not forced to do this. If you are really good at what you do and you like what you do and you want to stay where you are, we can find a good career for you. But if you want to be a supply chain leader, this is what would be expected of you, the lateral moves into other parts of the supply chain to learn and grow. We've been having, and we call this a one product supply career path or career model. And we've been doing this since about 2013 in a formal way like that, probably informally for about a half a decade earlier.
So, Andrew, when we were prepping for the call, you talked about how people should think about their career, and I just love your quote here. Do you mind to share kind of that high-level insight when you talk about mentoring, about how to think about your career?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure this connected to I recruit and talk to and have interns who are millennials. And it's all about, what's now and what's next. And, what I always tell people is when you want to think about yourself in a supply chain context as a successful supply chain leader, delivering great results and being satisfied, the context you need to look at that is really the end of your career or the finish line. It's the sum of the body of your work, right? The experiences you've had, the results you deliver, the achievements. And the supply chain is diverse and it's dynamic. and it's changing rapidly, right? It's all about home deliveries and e-business and mega cities. That's what the future is. It's not what the past has been. Big box warehouses and DCs. It's dynamic, and we just coach people. You have to build your skills, and it takes time, and that's what supply chain leaders do. So it's measure it at the finish line, not in your first or second assignment.
But one of the things we find in the research, Fran, is that millennials want a defined career path. And, if I think back, when I first started in supply chain, it didn't even have a name. And, I think about what Andrew is saying about the future. It's going to look very, very different. What's your coaching for millennials who want a really definitive career path?
Yeah, there's an interesting statistic recently that said for the children or the young people entering college, when they graduate, that a high percentage of them will enter a job that wasn't even created yet. So I think it's this. You start off and you have to feel like you're contributing and you're always learning, but you can't expect anymore to be able to do that for your entire career. So it's focused on the advice I like to give is think of what your dream job is and the short-term dream job, so maybe not the next job but the job away, and what do I need to be competitive for that, and how do I make sure I'm gaining the experiences, I'm networking with the right folks, and learning and demonstrating that I have a skill to be competitive for that job. And that things will change over time. I don't think saying what I want to do 20, 25 years from now is possible. The world's changing too fast, but quite frankly, that's what makes it fun as well. I just love the name of your the webinar here, because taking charge, right? So I always say, you need to take charge of your own career, take advantage of everything that there is to offer, whether it's, get mentors, it's take advantage of the training, it's think about these are the skills that I'll need, and making sure you're putting plans in place, because the world of entitlement is no longer. And, we cherish and we train, but it's really up to all of us. I have my own development plan. Everybody should have their own development plan as they go forward.
Well, thanks, Fran and Andrew. I'm going to go through some additional research, and then I'm going to come back and ask you about analytics and about building teams. So let's go through some research, and then let's come back and have a dialogue. And again, I want to remind people that are listening, we really want this to be a discussion. So as you have questions, please put them in the chat window, and we'll incorporate them into the discussions. So every year, Supply Chain Insights does a supply chain talent survey, and we're looking at open positions, number of positions, where the talent shortage is, clear strategies, training effectiveness, budgets for training. And this is research we started 3 years ago, and quite frankly, it's not changed a lot, but on average, people have 60% have open positions. The positions are open for 7 to 9 months, particularly in the area of planning and analytics. Mid-management talent is our greatest issue, and most people are struggling for what I'm going to call mid-management talent. And it's expected to get worse as the first and second generation supply chain pioneers retire. And what we find in the research is that people are able to get entry-level employees. So either hiring engineers, they're hiring great students out of supply chain programs, but it's the mid-management talent. And so the dynamic is that as people retire, as we're trying to create supply chains and new economies, as supply chain becomes a more popular discipline within organizations, are being pulled. And what's happening is we're pulling against the mid-management talent. And so the jobs that people would normally have 4 to 9 years in, we don't have enough of those kind of people. And so a lot of dialogue is happening with clients and contacts I have in industry of how do we fill this mid-management talent gap? Fran, are you feeling this pain? And if so, any insights?
Yeah, I think that, especially for companies, for a period of time, we just focused on the hiring was in emerging markets, and we ended up with this gap. And I agree, a lot of emphasis on bringing in vitality, early professional hires, and we've got good programs in place and mentoring and helping them grow. For the middle management, it's we're looking at, and it helps with the T-shape, so managers and executives across IBM that have demonstrated good skills, bringing them in and having them learn the supply chain aspect of it, if you will, and looking externally. I think we're getting to a point where we've got pretty good plans in place, but I think if we hadn't taken action a couple of years ago, it would have even gotten worse as our aging population did choose to retire, and we didn't have that backfill. But it's an ongoing focus, right? That just doesn't happen. You have to work at it.
Yeah, and you started a while ago, and one of the issues that I think an IBM or a Procter & Gamble have is people are continually looking to recruit from your talent pools. So you've got to be more aggressive. So, Andrew, how about yourself? Are you seeing the mid-management talent gap, and if so, what are you doing?
As a generalization, the answer is yes. Different parts of the globe have, different profiles, but in general, yes. And there's a unique ripple with P&G. We are a promote from within company, so more than 90% of our hires come in at entry level. It's really specialists like doctors, government lobbyists, et cetera, who come in at higher levels. So what we're facing is attrition. We are known for hiring great people, training them well, getting them great exposure, and then frankly, providing great benefits. And then, frankly, other companies come along and don't have the capability to invest, but can recruit our people away. Or people just come in, they try it. People, the millennials, Gen Y, a little bit more mobile in terms of career. So we face some gaps in that middle management, the skills and experience profile we'd expect people to have. So what are we doing about it? We've got a lot of programs to hothouse the growth and development and accelerate the pace of growth and development of the people we're bringing in, giving them more experience and more responsibility sooner so that they can take on more, and also that the challenge keeps them stimulated. We're not really seeing it in more senior management. We've been able to develop pretty deep benches at more senior levels. It's that lower middle management where we've got some pockets that we're trying to close.
Well, and one of the areas that we see as a shortage are people that have deep analytics skills. So, if we look at ease or difficulty of filling positions, it's not the supply chain execution, customer service, transportation, warehouse management, where the industry is seeing the greatest skill gaps, but it's more at the intersection of analytics and supply chain and the evolving world of analytics. And I know, Fran, you do a lot of work around new forms of analytics and testing analytics, and one of the things I've learned from you is, how do you get a new paradigm to really look at analytics so it isn't just implementing a new project, but it's really continuous testing and learning? Any thoughts here around growing the next generation around analytics and filling some of these jobs?
Yeah, and I do. I think it's so important. And we do put a lot of emphasis on it. One I had mentioned is that we have identified it as a skill that's necessary to be successful in the future. So therefore, if an employee wants to improve and get the next promotion, that they need to work on it. But we do enough. We have a grassroots community. It's voluntary, and it kind of just spreads itself. We do recognition for analytic projects. When we do analytic projects, we pair people up. We have a line expert, we have an analytic expert, and then we have a transformation or process expert. Because if you don't change the management system and the process, it's just really an interesting mess. So making sure all three are signed up and learning. We've instituted this expert program in that we have you can line up one subject matter expert, and then they kind of group mentor, so it's all around a subject matter, in this case analytics, and we'll have grapevine sessions, we'll have any advice needed for projects, you can go back and seek it. So, and we're always, open, agile, ready to do more, but it's, giving every opportunity for our team to develop their own skills, recognize those that are implementing it. I'll go out and personally congratulate folks that are doing it or that have applied it. And then from a business point of view, we published the results. This analytic project, we reduced inventory by X amount or increased our turns by this amount. We reduced returns, whatever the business outcome we were trying to drive, promote the results that analytics let us, how they contributed to achieving it.
Yeah, and Fran, one of the things that I loved about a podcast I did with you about 8 months ago was you talked about the how. So many times people see analytics projects as, a project, I'm going to take technology X and I'm going to put it in. But one of the things I loved about what you talked about was testing and learning and being able to refine analytics as an evolutionary process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's we say think big, but start small. And, one thing that at least within IBM, but I think it's with everybody, people say, oh, it's great to fail fast, it's okay, reward failure. But that never happens. We're all competitive. We don't want to fail. So what we now, the term, we're borrowing it from the Agile culture, is course correct. So if you think about it, on an analytics project, you think big, but you start small. This is what I want to drive. You get the results, and you course correct. And when you plan that in, it's really not failure at all. You're waiting for that to happen. So it's very powerful in a way, it kind of makes people feel safe. So even if they're not comfortable with the new technology, you learn as you go, and you iterate, course correct, and you keep going. And so we found that very beneficial. So I'd say just trying, getting the results, getting smarter each time, and then getting that three responsible leaders, the analytics expert, the management system process expert, and the person that owns that business outcome.
Thanks for that perspective, because I think so many times people look at these as discrete projects, and it's kind of like put the system in and then evolve. But Andrew, if I think about analytics and I think about the way you've gone about it, systemically, I remember talking to Dick Clark on the early evolution of demand planning, where Dick spent 2.5 years traveling the world talking about roles and definitions for demand and supply planning. I used to have conversations with Dick about why can't we do this quicker, and why do you have to do so much training and orientation? But now as I look at the evolution of your processes and the continuity that you've had in the processes, I better understand. Can you talk about where you're at in this evolution and any insights?
Sure. There's probably 2 points here, and they might be a little bit of a paradox. But, Laura, I think I spent 3 years working in Japan. And one of the cultural aspects in Japan, if I remember the term correctly, is something called nemawashi, loosely translates to conversation circle. And that's really getting sure that everyone in the operation understands what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, how we do it, what success looks like. And when I say everyone, I mean down to the technicians, the secretaries, everybody. And as an outsider, it seemed painstakingly slow. But in execution, it was lickety-split. So I think, part of what you saw with the Dick Clark, travel the world 2.5 years is just we need to get our teams aligned. Now, the paradox that I referenced, recently we had our global product supply leadership team do a visit through Silicon Valley. And one of the things they picked up was done is better than perfect. And one of the things I've noticed over my career is it's a truism. All change starts with leadership. And when your leadership is truly saying done is better than perfect, it creates a lot of headspace for just like Fran was saying, try something, see how it works. I love the term course correct, but just, get out there and get going. And there's also increased respect and frankly demand from our leadership for modeling and simulation. The big data is out there. What are we doing to harness it, leverage it, use it? So that's probably been the experiences that I see most right now.
Well, and we have a question. Andrea asked, are there specific skill sets that you see lacking for promotable talent from entry to middle management? Andrew, anything come to mind that, are particularly problematic or a target point for you?
If I can appropriate Fran's T-shaped model, if you're trying to move up relatively quickly, you need skill and strength in a core competency somewhere. Is it, warehousing, transportation, planning, purchasing, quality assurance, manufacturing. You need to have some home base for your career that you're really good at and you calibrate well. And to move and advance, you really need to be broadening. We're looking for supply chain leaders. Supply chain leaders are going to have skills outside their home base. So it's really accelerating that progress in what P&G calls a one product supply career path, or the T-shaped model that Fran was talking about.
Fran, how about yourself? When you did that assessment of skills to really move from entry to mid-management, what were the things you identified?
Yeah, I think that maybe a little. One of the approaches we took is we like acronyms in IBM, sometimes unfortunately, and it's we had an acronym TNT, so think of it as power, but it was and we have numeric bands, so top 9s and 10s. But the focus there was we lined up some executive leaders outside of their vertical chain, if you will, and we're not as a mentor, but just as an advocate and a chance to give visibility and to learn to present and demonstrate leadership outside of their exact area of expertise. And if I think of that, I think that really helped or demonstrate a skill that perhaps they didn't have an opportunity to show before. So maybe the advice is volunteer for a special project, or in our case, we had a special project with some our vitality hires to help a local nonprofit redesign their supply chain. And, it ended up morphing into this great project. They got a grant. But I was thinking, those leaders, they would have never gotten that visibility before, and now we're able to, that very much helped their career. They got visibility with upper management, but they showed they could do something outside of their exact job. So maybe it's not skills lacking, but it's look for those opportunities where you can demonstrate you have skills outside of your area, because that's showing leadership, and that's, then the people that are looking to fill those jobs have you in mind. Wow, I just saw so-and-so presenting on that project. So it's, I encourage people to try to volunteer for something outside of your normal area, and it's really a chance to showcase your own skills.
Yeah, and I'm working with a company that actually does internal co-ops where they encourage company movement on a short-term basis, where somebody will come cross-divisional or cross-functional and cross-geography for short-term assignments to broaden their career and they encourage that. Andrew, anything you're doing in that area?
Sure. So P&G has a program we call it Early Career Broadening. And, if you get outside of North America, let's just say Europe or Latin America, you have a lot of countries, maybe not to the size and scale of like a U.S. And, so the roles you can get to and, some of the tenure of people makes it a little harder to move. So we look at like early career broadening, which isn't necessarily a full-blown expatriate assignment, but it's similar to that, which can get you into other geographies. And we also do for people who are really tapped as high potential, we really look early for opportunities to broaden them, get them into other areas intentionally, early, so that they can grow faster.
Yeah, and I think this is also important because if we look at the trends that we're seeing in this B2B panel where we've got consistency of people answering the same survey, we actually see that people feel that they're getting worse at managing supply chain as compared to their peers. And some of this is, I think, that the environment is getting tougher, that we have that awareness of mid-management talent issues. And when we ask people to think about their challenges, and I thought this was an interesting slide, and what we looked at is what are the top 3 problems in the next 5 years, which is on the vertical axis, versus the top 3 problems today. And if you look at some of the feedback around won't embrace new ways of thinking or providing key skills or unclear career path, so much of this is rooted in culture. And lack of executive support, whereas the traditional articles are around how do we get people globally and hiring in specific countries, which is less of an issue for the people in the survey. Fran, any thoughts about these data points? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I really think, and I'm so pleased actually that not embracing new ways is becoming less of a challenge. Because I think if you went back 5 years ago and where we had more, I'd say, hardcore vertical supply chain leaders and executives and not willing to change, and that has evolved so much. So I'm very happy to see that over as a decreasing challenge. But I still think this change in skill requirements is so, and I don't think it's just within the supply chain. I think that in our industry, it's just such a transformation as we go into this data era and all the data out there. But if you don't learn how to quickly, get the insights you need and help drive business outcome, you can get lost. And then from our point of view, client-facing skills is so important, and it's not here we develop, therefore you buy from us. It's really understanding, what do the clients need? How do you deliver it better than your competitors to them, and be easy to do business with, and think ahead of time on what they need is so important and such a big part of the supply chain. And then, we talked about.
I agree. I'm sorry, Fran, you still there?
Yes. Yeah. So
okay.
I was just going to say, I think, I'm not sure I think it's hard to attract the right people, but I think it's important on this continual transformation of yourself as well, developing the right skills. That is a key focus.
Absolutely. Now, Andrew, I know you're trying some new ways of working. You talked a little bit about career pathing with, giving people flexibility and work style. Anything you want to talk about here?
Sure. I think there's probably 2 things, since a lot of this is, what coaching or advice would we be giving your webinar listeners? There's probably 2 things. One is, whenever I get a chance, I tell people there is not a perfect career plan, okay? what you want to be doing is opening more and more doors and options for yourself. And by the way, don't burn any bridges. Because things are so dynamic and the rate of change is just so fast-paced. You want to keep doors open and create options for yourself. And the way you'll think about yourself and what inspires you and what your passion is can be very different in a few years. Also, we're starting to see more, on-off pause in the way people think about careers. It's not the old days where I enter and I charge as hard as I can for as long as I can to get as high as I can. People are looking for different things to define success in their life. And when I say pause, there's a time when you want to have children and they're young and, you want a work challenge, but you don't want it to be overwhelming, 80-hour weeks. And there's a time where, no, I really want the challenge. I really want to show what I can do, and 80-hour weeks don't scare me. The other thing we're doing is we're making some structural changes that are both good for our business and also good for our people. So there are a lot of folks, for example, who want a career in planning, okay? So, and planning is organizing logic and common sense and, to deliver a business outcome. There are people who want to do that, but they don't want to be buttonholed. And we used to have our planning type work really dispersed. I mean, in hundreds of locations. It was more than 200 different locations. And we're on a path to get that down to about, less than 10. And that allows people in those locations to have a very rich career in lots of different areas of planning without having to continually uproot their family, relocate, start over, and still have a successful career. I moved very frequently with P&G early. I mean, there's that old joke, pack and go. And I used to describe to people I was just looking to have an arc of friends because I was constantly moving. A circle of friends was beyond my reach, And we're finding that that's not necessarily what this current, the millennials and the next generation may want. So, we're doing some structural things like our planning service centers, giving people rich careers, lots of different aspects of planning, demand planning, production planning, inventory planning, service planning, innovation and artwork planning. I don't have to move to experience lots of different areas of the supply chain and keep myself stimulated, have lots of different jobs, opportunities to grow, without all the trade-offs around, uprooting myself, my family, dual careers, other factors.
Yeah, Andrew, we have a couple of questions that I'm going to bundle together. One is, are certifications important? So like the APIC certification or the CSCMP certification. And how do you think about expats and staffing global economies? And then I'll ask you next, Fran. How would you answer those two questions?
So our view is they are nice but not sufficient in terms of certifications, okay? That by itself does not advance your career. In fact, we don't, as policy, we don't even reimburse people for membership in those organizations. If you want to do that because it's your passion, it's motivating, you love networking, you learn things and can apply it on the job, that's great. But, the certifications, remember, we are promote from within, so it's really about your performance and your business results in the P&G context. So that may not be the same for lots of other companies, where they hire at any level and external certifications may make a difference. But from a promote within company like P&G, it's not it's not a factor that's really going to make a difference. Now, if that hones your leadership skills, if that makes you smarter on solving analytic problems, if that clues you into new ways of problem-solving solutions, and that yields better results internally, then it's been a good investment, and we're very happy. On the question of expats, really expats serve two purposes within P&G. One is we are developing our future generation of leaders, and the world is growing more and more global. People need to understand how the business runs, cultures, dynamics. beyond where they grew up. And I grew up in the U.S. It's a huge market, huge population. We have lots of leaders who grew up in small countries, Hungary, Holland, Taiwan, etc. Populations are in the tens of millions, low tens of millions. If they don't get exposed to a broader pool, they're really not going to unleash the potential they can bring to our company. So again, one set of expat experiences is developing our next generation of leaders. The second role for expats is really discrete problem solving. We've got an issue, a problem, a business need. Organically, we cannot fill it. The local organization just doesn't have the technological skills, the mastery, the experience, and the business need is big enough to merit bringing in an expat, which is quite costly, as well as, not just solving the problem. The expectation is the expat grooms the local organization to take over for them. So those are really the two ways we look at expats, and it's applicable in supply chain, and frankly, it would be applicable in any part of our business.
Fran, your thoughts on those two questions?
Yeah, I think it's actually very similar. On the certifications, I think it's much more important, and Andrew said the same thing, is that you have the skills and that you demonstrate the skills. So whether it's project management or supply chain, so it's certificates are interesting, but it's having and demonstrating the skills that are important within my experience and within IBM. On the expats, one thing we did, and our overall goal is always to have our teams in each country be led by locals, but we don't always have the skills, and especially as some of the high growth areas. We did a two in a box and found that to be very successful. So we would take a top talent that we'd identified to be a leader. We would marry them with an expat, and the intention is when the expat would return, that the leader would take over. And sometimes it didn't work out, but we didn't have a failure in that we learned that they didn't have the right skills without having it be harmful to the business results and actually even to the leader themselves. So we found this two in a box worked quite well. But I couldn't agree more. We still do have international assignments where it's, taking top leaders wherever they are in the globe and getting across experiences that it really helps develop make you able to be a global leader in the future. So just as a recommendation to anybody, if they have the opportunity and it's the right timing for their personal and family reasons to do an international assignment, I highly recommend it.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and then I'm going to ask you to wrap up. Andrew, the question is the digital supply chain and making the pivot to digital. As we think about, the fact our systems are based upon transactions, they're not based upon unstructured data, or we think about digital processes outside in. How do we prepare people for the digital supply chain and make the pivot? Any insights there?
I am struggling for the right statistical term. You're really dealing with at least two different populations here. You've got the millennials who are all about digital and access and information, and they need context, right? They need, okay, so I know what the data is, and I'm fearless in getting it, but now what do I do with it? You've got the more mature workforce who is really having to cope with change, right? I think the people who won't embrace change, we see that in the decreasing challenges, are really probably moving out of the supply chain field because there's just so much more data available that helps us understand things. In fact, my personal view, you had a chart up like 2 or 3 slides ago where people were saying they think their problems are growing bigger versus other companies. And my reaction is It's actually people know more about other companies through what they, blogs, data, et cetera, and awareness is higher, not necessarily the situation is changing. I mean, so in terms of digitization, if you're a supply chain professional and you want to be winning now and in the future, there are so many more opportunities to be synchronized and to be faster with, less losses, higher service, lower inventory by leveraging data to substitute for time or substituting for inventory or substituting for extra cost. It is just finding effective ways to harness all this data and translate it into your work systems. And I think that's going to be a challenge, I think it's going to be a continual challenge as the onset of the big data era is with us.
Fran, how about you? Thoughts about making the digital pivot?
Yeah, I think it's critical, and if it's not today, it's going to be for sure tomorrow. So maybe network with people that have the same passion that you do. Try to find an executive that can be your sponsor. Don't think too big, but start with this, or think big, but start with a small project. Get a sponsor, and you know what? All of a sudden, you start getting results, and you go, and it gains momentum. I think we have a term, treasure wild ducks, and I just think it's so important. And if you think of it, a millennial coming in, what an opportunity if you can, get people with a like mind, get a sponsor so you get the right resources and get a project going and start getting results. You can really, take charge of your career.
I love that, treasure wild ducks. So what you're saying is, provide an environment where wild ducks can be successful, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's close now. Andrew, if you had one piece of advice for the listeners, what would it be?
Probably, so this was all about taking charge of your career. I think I would just make a mosaic out of a couple of themes. The future is changing and dynamic. Don't aim for a perfect career path. Aim for meeting your, personal aspirations and being satisfied. And think about, as I measure it, when I look at the body of my work and career, did I achieve what I wanted to? And I also think, with things so dynamic, so changing, just keeping doors open and staying with your eyes on the future, the emerging trends, the emerging skills and requirements, that's going to make the difference between a successful supply chain leader and somebody who may not achieve as much or be as satisfied.
Fran, your closing thoughts? Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, I'll go back to the theme of the webinar. I just think it's just so appropriate. We all need to take charge ourselves. So take charge. Think about the future. Take advantage of everything. Every company has its own unique set of programs, but find out what are they. Make sure you're out there. Set up that network, right? Most jobs, most leadership jobs, it's going to be a pull-in. So the more visibility and the more you're able to show your learning and demonstrate your new skills, when there is an opening, people are going to pull you into that. So always have that, how can I take advantage of everything that's offered, and you can then showcase yourself and those skills as you move forward. It's really much more of a, I don't go to a class and therefore I have a skill. What am I doing to showcase and take advantage?
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Fran. I love your insights. I love Treasure Wild Ducks. I love the concept about thinking about the body of work. I love the thoughts of the T-shaped manager. They're just so different than what we would have heard 5-6 years ago. At Supply Chain Insights, we want to help. So we're offering public training in August in Philadelphia for those that are interested in the digital pivot, and we're offering a new experiential learning program based upon AnyLogic on Outside-In Processes, which is a group simulation game to help people to better understand supply chain. We're also having an annual event where we're going to be talking about what are these digital technologies, how do we think about making the digital pivot, where is Supply Chain 2020 going, and how do we think about Supply Chain 2020 and think about networking with great leaders. We're also in the process of launching our new online community, which will be available for supply chain leaders around the world. It's not commercial. We're in beta testing for it. It'll launch in September. We'll ask great thought leaders around the world to add content, to share news, to be able to get at some of the financial metric work we were doing and some of the supply chain maturity work. And we look forward to connecting with you on any of these avenues. We want to help supply chain leaders around the world to make the pivot to be able to create better organizations. And as always, I look forward to connecting with people through my blog, Supply Chain Shaman, through my Forbes and LinkedIn posts, and I look forward to hearing from you. I answer every email, and we love doing these webinars and appreciate the support from people like Andrew and Fran. We want to help supply chain leaders around the world. Allison, back to you.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks to Fran and Andrew for your participation today. This was great. I want to thank everyone who joined our webinar. Just a few things to share to wrap up, a couple of you who asked me about it. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the webinar, we're going to send out the slides to everyone who attended today as well as the recording link. So keep an eye out for that sometime in the next 24 hours. I'm also going to include a couple of links to recent blogs we've written on talent. So we'd like to get your feedback on those blogs as well. And we encourage you to engage with us on social media by following us on Twitter, joining our LinkedIn company page, and following us on SlideShare. So thanks again, everyone, that joined us today. And if you ever have a question about supply chain or supercharging your career, please reach out to us. We're here to help.